Hi everyone, we're going to get started in just a few seconds here. We're just allowing people to get entered into the room. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Well, good afternoon everyone. My name is Mac Girr. I am the Event and Program Manager at Traverse Connect. Thank you all so much for being here today. We're very excited to put on this opportunity for you all. Just a few housekeeping items I'd like to go over with you all today. This will be recorded and posted to our website and social media channels within 24 hours after the event. We would love to hear from you all. If you have any questions at all, we do encourage you to ask these questions. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see a Q&A box. Within that Q&A box, you can go ahead and submit your questions. We do just ask that you please include the company that you are with. Again, that will be located at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A box, not the chat box. On that note, I would now like to turn it over to Kirstie Sieloff. Kirstie, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Molly. Good evening. My name is Kirstie Sieloff, and I am the Director of Government Relations for Traverse Connect and the Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance. Welcome to Traverse Connect's Meet the Candidates event, where you will have a chance to hear from candidates running for the 104th State House seat. Tonight's event will allow our investors to learn where our candidates stand on issues important to our business community, because the questions are generated by you. This is a live event, so please use the Q&A feature to submit a question you would like to hear. Please also include the name of your business. We are accepting questions until the candidate introductions are done. As you know, we have a big election coming up on November 3rd. It's critically important for our business community that we elect leaders who care about issues important to us, especially as we address our COVID-19 recovery. Here at Traverse Connect, we will be providing education to our investors through online candidate profiles for State Representative, Grand Traverse County Commission, TCAPS Board, and NMC Board. In addition to tonight's event, we will also be hosting a second Meet the Candidates event for the Grand Traverse County Commission on Tuesday, September 29th at 6 p.m. Traverse Connect and the entire coalition of our 16 chambers and economic development organizations within the Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance continue to advocate for the needs of rural Northern Michigan and our over 7,000 member businesses. During the pandemic, we know how important it is to have access to decision makers and build those relationships. Since the onset of the pandemic, the Alliance has offered access to state and federal officials, and Traverse Connect continues this effort tonight with an opportunity to meet our state rep candidates. As you all know, our advocacy is investor driven. This is done by listening to you and also feedback generated by our Government Relations Committee. So I would now like to introduce my advocacy partner, Rachel Johnson, Chair of the Traverse Connect Government Relations Committee and member of the Board of Directors.
Thanks, Kirstie. Welcome, everyone. I don't know about you all, but there's nowhere I would rather be on a Tuesday during election season than having a rousing conversation about the needs of our business community. On behalf of the Traverse Connect Government Relations Committee, I just want to thank both of our candidates and also our virtual audience for taking the time to join us tonight. One of the most important services that chambers and economic development organizations provide is advocacy. And that's where your Government Relations Committee comes in. We work with staff to drive pro-business policy that supports the unique needs of our region, our regional businesses, and our regional economy. Tonight's event is just one of the many ways we seek to connect our investors with our current and future local and state leaders. The questions our candidates will be asked tonight were created, some of the questions were created in partnership between the Government Relations Committee and the Traverse City Young Professionals. And those questions, they really represent our understanding of the collective needs of our business community. But we also want to have questions from you. This is a live event, as Kirstie mentioned, so we will be taking questions from our audience in the Q&A up until the end of the candidate introduction. So please do weigh in and ask questions about what's on your mind as a local business leader. With that, I would love to hand it over to Warren Connect, who is the CEO, Warren Call, who is the CEO of Traverse Connect.
Thank you, Rachel. On behalf of the entire board and the staff of Traverse Connect, thank you all for being with us this evening. Traverse Connect's mission is to foster the growth of family-sustaining careers in the Grand Traverse region. And we have a clear roadmap for accomplishing this goal. Traverse Connect advocates every day for policies to drive economic prosperity through policy engagement, business growth services, and talent attraction initiatives. We support, build, and sustain a vibrant business community by engaging our business owners, policymakers, and influencers across the region to address issues and opportunities that are important to our members and our community partners. And we strongly believe the relationship between the business community and our elected leaders is essential for economic prosperity in our region, across Northern Michigan, and throughout the state. But we know that that's not enough. To preserve the progress we have made and to continue to drive forward, we need to support and help elect courageous leaders who will stand up for our region. Elected officials whose policies align with our economic and community development priorities and help to create those all-important family-sustaining careers in our region. Education and access to candidates, such as this forum, are key components of our voter engagement initiatives, which provide voter information to everyone: business owners, employees, families, community, and nonprofit leaders, and of course, the general public. We want to encourage broad participation in the political process. Thank you to the candidates for participating in this forum today, and thank you to our investors and the community for engaging in this important work. It's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight, Nathan Payne, Executive Editor at the Record Eagle. Nate, please take it away.
Thanks, Warren. And thank you to Traverse Connect for putting this together. This is a wonderful opportunity to hear directly from our candidates on issues that matter to Traverse Connect's members and investors, and also to our community. I'm excited about the list of questions we have tonight. I think they prove that even in the midst of enormous upheaval, a lot of the same issues still matter to people who are going to go to the polls in November. And frankly, there's no more important moment in our democracy than selecting our representatives. And an educated electorate and an informed electorate is extraordinarily important. That's core to our mission at the Record Eagle, and we're proud to be part of this forum, because I think there's no better way to hear from candidates than in their own words. So we'll jump into the candidates. We have Dan O'Neill for on the Democratic side of the ticket, and John R. Roth on the Republican side of the ticket. I can run you through the forum overview at this time. Quick reminder, this is a live event, so that you please use the Q&A feature to submit a question you want to hear right now. We're accepting those questions until the candidate intros are done. And those questions will be put into the mix, at least one of them, I believe. Two, sorry. Each candidate will get 3 minutes for an opening statement. Each candidate then will answer 12 questions with 2 minutes to respond to each question. 9 of those questions were given to candidates in advance. 2 questions will come from the audience, and 1 question will come from the Record Eagle. Each candidate gets 3 minutes for closing statements, and our timekeeper, Liz McKellar, will keep track of time raising cards. So there's 1 for 30 seconds left. And then time, and we will signal time with a bell. We also have 1 minute, sorry. When time runs out, we'll ring the bell. We also will shut off the speaker's microphone for fairness. So we'll start with opening statements. Candidates were drew numbers for order. The order will be reversed for closing statements. And the candidate with the lowest number card was Dan O'Neill. So if you would like to take it away, Dan.
Thanks, Nate. And thanks to Traverse Connect and to the Record Eagle for hosting us this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to answer questions. I think that, candidates, one of the most important things they can do is stand in front of their communities, tell people where they stand on the issues, and answer the questions that they have. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I also wanted, before I begin, we find ourselves in difficult times, and maybe for many of us, the strangest of times. And it's certainly been a challenging climate for everyone, and in particular for our local businesses. And I just think that Traverse Connect has done a terrific job in providing leadership through a crisis that no one could see coming, and that seemed to change from day to day. For those of us in the community who were observing, and small business owners in the community, the advice we got was solid, reasonable, no hysteria, based on science, based on the best recommendations, and I think helped us all and continues to help us as we move through this difficult time. So thank you to Traverse Connect for that. So I'm Dan O'Neill. I'm an attorney here in Traverse City. I own a small law firm downtown with my partner, George Thompson. The firm is Thompson O'Neill. We've been in practice in Traverse City for more than 30 years. I grew up here in Traverse City. Went to school here, attended college at Central Michigan University, and then attended law school at what was then Detroit College of Law and is now Michigan State's law school. I grew up with 6 kids in our family. For those of you maybe old enough to remember, my dad worked at Montgomery Ward's downtown for about 30 years. My mother helped found the Father Fred Foundation many years ago. So our roots are deep in this community. We raised 3 children here. My wife, Maura Brennan, is also a practicing attorney and community activist. And, we feel grounded to this place. This is our community, and we feel a commitment to it. And I think it's that commitment that prompted me to first run for office. I had served on, I had not been involved really in politics until 2 years ago. I had served on some boards around the state for organizations whose values I agreed with and who I thought did good work. Common Cause, for example, an organization that's dedicated to working on campaign finance reform and access to the ballot and making it easier to vote. I served for 10 years on the Traverse City Planning Commission.
Okay, time's up. Sorry. We tested that time right away. John, you're up. Thank you thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Nate. I appreciate it. Thank you to Traverse Connect for having us here tonight. Really appreciate the leadership and everything they're doing in the community. I'm John Roth, running for state representative, obviously, for the 104th. And I'm running for one simple reason: to keep this vibrant, great community of Grand Traverse County and Traverse City going forward. I want this place to be a place that my daughters can, if they desire, stay here and make their home here, make a living here, have a good job here. And not just them, but all the kids in our community. If they want to stay here, we want them to be able to be here. And I really, really think we have a great community, and I want to keep it that way. I will work with anyone I need to make that community this way. My background is that I've been working three jobs over the last 18 years. One of those is a small business. I signed both sides of the paycheck, obviously. I hired kids to work for me. I know the issues that come forth being a small business person, regulations that we have to deal with, weather, COVID, tourism, being the economy could be disruptive. So I know what it's like to have a small business. The thing that I'm probably most proud of is being on but served on a lot of boards, but most proud that I am is serving on the Grand Traverse County Parks and Rec Board over the last 6 years. Ended my term in December. I was chair of that board for 4 of those 6 years. On that board, we work with community members to develop different priorities or different programs so that we can make our parks more vibrant. The one that was probably the most difficult was the former playground that was at the Civic Center. We found that it was laced with arsenic. It was a tough choice, but we had to tear it down. We had to deal with that, and it wasn't great. But we worked with private funders and public funding and got it put back in place, and it's better than ever. Kids are having a great time there. We will continue to do that. We did continue to do that. We renovated a lot of our different parks, and we got more revenue to our parks to make them a little more self-sustaining and more worthwhile to use. And I'm just proud as can be to be part of that. And I just want to keep this community going forward and get it going and keep it going in the progress that we're getting here. People are moving here. We're growing at 7% every decade. Let's continue that momentum.
Thank you, John. We're going to pause for just a second to get our audience submitted questions into the mix here, and then we will get rolling with the questions. The format for the forum tonight is the candidate with the lowest number will answer the questions first, and the candidates will answer questions in a random order so that they don't follow each other with a call and response structure. So we're sticking more to a forum organization for tonight. So the first question goes to Dan O'Neill. What is the long-term solution to adequately fund schools in Michigan?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nate. And I think the first thing to recognize is what's clear is that our current funding system isn't working. We're 43rd in the country, Michigan is, in terms of academic achievement, and we're falling. 2 years ago, the United States Department of Education cited Michigan and the Northern Marianas Islands for being the two states, if you will, that had essentially failed to provide an adequate education to kids with special needs in our state. You'll hear a lot about the need to have equal funding around the state, and of course, we need to have equal funding. But you can play with the funding formula all you want, and it won't change the fact that a bipartisan group, the School Finance Research Collaborative, has determined that we are underfunding our schools in Michigan to the tune of about $25,000 per classroom. We need a stable, dependable, and equitable model of funding in this state, and we just don't have it. We've also made a choice to stop funding higher education in this state. We spend less on higher education than we did in 2003. When I was a student at Central Michigan University, the state funded approximately 83% of my college education. Last year, that number was 14%. If we had held funding levels stable since 2010, tuition at Michigan State this year would have been about $6,000. It's closer to 14. We're literally getting close to the point in this state where we're going to try to build an economy with the least educated population in the country. And I think we can all predict how that's going to turn out.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Next question goes to John. This one comes from the audience. What would be your first initiative that you would champion on behalf of the residents of Traverse City?
Great question. Still working on those priorities as far as initiatives that I want to do. Education is always huge here, and I will continue to fight for equal funding of our area. And I'm going to work across the aisle with anybody I can get to get people to agree that equal funding for education is important in this state. We'll work with that, and then we will continue to work on different issues that are in our area. I'm still developing my own plan on the actual initiatives to fund and have submitted to the legislature, and we'll have those ready pretty darn soon.
Okay, Dan, your next question comes from the young professionals. Traverse Connect has established a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative to understand the challenges our community faces, educate ourselves on the current state of diversity and inclusion, in our community and state, and to inspire, challenge, and bring people together for sustainable change. How would you use your role to influence diversity, equity, and inclusion in our community?
Yeah, I think that the business community has provided terrific leadership on this issue. Historically, so the way to prevent discrimination, it seems, was to ignore our differences. And it turns out that it's much better to acknowledge our differences, to take advantage of our differences, and to be as diverse, to create as diverse groups as we possibly can, and to celebrate that diversity. And it turns out that it works. Businesses that highlight and recruit diverse workforces are more productive, they make better decisions, and they're more successful than those who don't. And I think that local units of government around the state and the state itself could learn a lot from that example. By the same token, we can't pretend that discrimination doesn't exist. And it's important that we have enforcement mechanisms to prevent discrimination when we see it. For example, I support amending Michigan's Civil Rights Act, the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, to prevent gender and sexual orientation discrimination. Traverse City passed an anti-discrimination ordinance about 10 years ago. And I was proud to work on that. I think the first meeting to organize it was held in my office. And, there were a lot of people then who said that if we did that, tourists would stop coming here. It'd be the end of our economy, and how wrong they were. Making Traverse City more diverse has only been good for our community. It's been good for business. And I think the business organizations and the business community have provided great leadership.
Thank you, Dan. All right, John, your next question also comes from the young professionals. In a Traverse Connect focus group comprised of individuals who recently moved to the region, participants noted the availability of housing as a barrier to life in the region. How do you intend to address the lack of adequate workforce housing?
Very good question. And it certainly is one of my items on my issues on my campaign. It is tough at a state level to truly force communities to do housing for working class folks. What you do is you work with your community, you work with your city, your municipalities, and see if we can change some zoning ordinances with density. I know there are some bills going through the House right now trying to incentivize builders to build workforce housing. And I would like to look at those to see what's in them, whether or not they need to be added to, or if they can even be passed. But I think the way you work is work with these people, work with the city, work with the townships, and see about getting regulations that can get more workforce housing in place. It's hard to just say that we're going to give a bunch of money at the state level. It's really the city and the townships have to be willing to do this in their own communities to provide workforce housing. I know the city of Traverse City has struggled with that a little bit, and I want to continue to work with them, work across the aisle, work with everybody possible to see if we can get some compromise and get some of this housing built. There's people that want to do it. It's just a matter of getting out there and getting communities to allow it to happen. And that's what I would continue to do.
All right. Thank you, John. Dan, this one comes from the audience. What would be your first initiative that you would champion on behalf of the residents of Traverse City?
Yeah, it's a good question, Nate. And it's hard to talk about priorities right now without considering the pandemic, because there are going to be a number of issues, economic issues that we need to deal with as a state and as a county as a result of the pandemic. And this pandemic is a crisis for sure. But the surest way to turn this crisis into a catastrophe is to lose sight of the priorities that we need to focus on in order to make sure that we have a prosperous future. And that means investing in education, that means investing in infrastructure, and that means having a functioning government, an open and honest government in Lansing that hears the voices of the people of the state as to what their needs are. But quite frankly, I can't think of an issue that's going to affect us all more than the need to assure that we provide adequate structure and funding to provide great education to our kids, because it's that investment that's going to lead us through this crisis and the crises we'll face in the future.
All right. Thank you, Dan. John, what are your plans for improving the cradle to grave education pipeline in Michigan?
Yes, good question. I'm all for more community education with community colleges. I am a product of the NMC here in Traverse City. I went to Central Michigan to start with, but when I moved up here, went back to school and went to NMC and got an associate's degree through NMC. I think education from early on till the day that you decide you don't want to do it anymore is important. Community or continuing education that goes through the college is very good. I support that. I think with skilled trades, I want to see more skilled trade training going through the colleges. If you are in a certain career and you want to go back to school, why not go through the college and get some different training? But education is important. I continue to do it. I'm also a part-time employee at a golf club where I spray chemicals, and I spray all the greens and tees and fairways, and I have to go back and continue my education for my spray license. So I think education is huge. It continues to be an issue where people want to continue to be educated and go forward. So supporting our Traverse MC here, who do a great job with the money they're provided, along with TCAPS, who do a great job in our area. I think that's how we support them, making sure we have vibrant colleges and schools going forward that people can go to and then get further educated. So that's how I would handle it.
Thank you, John. Dan, your next question comes from the young professionals. In a Traverse Connect focus group comprised of individuals who recently moved to the region, participants noted the availability of housing as a barrier to life in the region. How do you intend to address the lack of adequate workforce housing?
We hear an awful lot about affordable housing in Traverse City, and it's been an issue for an awfully long time. We spent a great deal of time working on that issue when I was on the Planning Commission. It's a difficult issue, and I'm not sure that there's any single strategy that is going to solve the problem. Things are a bit different here in Grand Traverse County. We're among the few counties in the state that are experiencing significant growth. And if I learned anything from my time on the Planning Commission, is that you cannot stop growth. You can't legislate it away. And there's no way to slam the door behind us when you come to this county. But if you manage it appropriately, you can lessen the impacts of growth, and it can actually enhance the quality of your community. There's no single thing that you can do, but I think there are some things that we ought to do. We ought to look at zoning ordinances and particularly inclusive zoning ordinances that tie high-end development to the creation of affordable housing and workforce housing or rental units. And supply and demand certainly dictates that we increase density, and that's something that we certainly need to do. And it seems oftentimes when we have these discussions that people are searching for a villain somewhere. There's somewhere that's someone or something that's preventing us from having affordable housing in our community. And I don't think we're going to find one. I think the answer will be having state representatives that work closely with local units of government, planning commissions, and layer by layer finds solutions. The state also has a role to play. The Michigan State Housing Authority just isn't designed, it has a point system that just isn't designed to help communities like ours, and that needs to change as well.
Thank you, Dan. John, what professional experience best positions you to represent Northern Michigan?
All of my experience. So when I talk about my jobs, being a small business owner, I understand very much it's a seasonal business, and our business is always hindered by the weather, the economy. We understand if we don't get good weather or we don't get an economy that people can do things, we don't get the customer. As a ski sales guy in the winter, I also see it. It's another tourism business. It's winter. If we don't get a good winter, we don't get good weather, we have a bad economy, we understand we're not going to get the business. And my hours have been cut. I understand that. I have to deal with that also. I know how hard it is then to pay bills when you come into the spring and into May, trying to make it to May. So that's my experience being a small business person and just being in the tourism industry for most of my adult life. I think it uniquely qualifies me to understand our economy up here better than most. And my wife and I are not independently wealthy. We know how it is to struggle like everybody else. So I think that alone makes me uniquely qualified.
Thank you, John. Dan, same question. What professional experience best positions you to represent Northern Michigan?
You know, I think I agree with John. You know, having lived my entire life here, I think I understand this community. I think I have an understanding of how we see ourselves. I think, you know, I also have an understanding of who we hope to be. I too am a small business owner, having a small law firm here in town. And I know what it's like when other families are depending on you to lay awake at night, wondering how you're going to make payroll. You know, I've spent a good deal of time as a mediator. It's part of my law practice, and I understand the need to recognize differing points of view and the need to communicate clearly and effectively in order to reach solutions. And as a planning commissioner, I understand, I think, as having served as a planning commissioner, I think I understand the ownership that people feel in this community. You know, most people have sacrificed to be part of this community. And when you pay a price for something, you feel a sense of ownership. And when you feel a sense of ownership, you feel an obligation to protect it and make it better. And I understand that's part of this community, that's part of who we are, and it's part of who I am. And I'll carry that to Lansing.
Thank you, Dan. John, this one comes from the young professionals. Traverse Connect has established a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative to understand the challenges our community faces, educate ourselves of the current state of diversity and inclusion in our community and state, and to inspire, challenge, and bring people together for sustainable change. How would you use your role to influence diversity, equity, and inclusion in our community?
Absolutely, and it starts with me. I need to be the best possible person I can be so the people in our community can look up to me as an example. I need to carry that forward. I think it's very important. We have an incredible community here. Over the years of me being here, over 33 years now, watching people being accepted into our community from all different backgrounds and diversity has been amazing. I think it's a tribute to our community. We have great people here. I'm not one that would accept any kind of racism or discrimination, whether it be any of the items, including religious discrimination. I don't accept that. I'm not one that would tolerate it. So all my jobs that I've had have been front of the house where I deal with the public. Crystal Mountain entrusted me to deal with issues that came up when dealing with the public and dealing with all kinds of people from different backgrounds. I just feel really comfortable that being the example and dealing with people on a one-to-one level and being a good person is what's most important. If we all did that, I think we'd have a better community.
Thank you, John. Dan, this question comes from the Record Eagle. Michigan is one of only 2 states that has exempted both the legislature and the governor from transparency laws, a fact that routinely earns our state last place in state-by-state government accountability rankings. Do you believe exemptions for our state elected officials should end? If so, how would you work to change the status quo? If not, why not?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that both the legislature and the executive branch of the government aren't subject to Michigan's Freedom of Information Act. Every other unit of government in the state is subject to that act, and there's absolutely no sensible reason why the legislature and the executive branch shouldn't be subject to the same requirements. We find ourselves in this state knowing less about how decisions get made and what influences the people that make those decisions than the citizens of any other state in the country. And that's unacceptable. It limits our voice in Lansing at a time when it couldn't be needed more. There was a recent proposal to have a limited Freedom of Information Act that applied to the legislature, but it eliminated the most important part of the Freedom of Information Act, which is that you can go to court to have it enforced if the governmental agency refuses to comply. So I think it's absolutely essential. It is an essential piece of good government, responsive government, transparent government that we desperately need in this state. And I would be a strong advocate for extending our current Freedom of Information Act to those two branches of government.
Thank you, Dan. John, what is the long-term solution to adequately funding our schools?
That is the question to be asked, that's for sure. A lot of people are asking that. I think we have to look at the overall funding, and I would be willing to work across the aisle with anybody that has good ideas to do that. I think we could amend the Proposal A slightly. We have to be very careful in doing that. One reason Proposal A passed was that the elderly had a hard time staying in their homes. And that's the last thing we want to do is kick out our elderly out of their homes. So I think working bipartisanly with other members of the State House and the Senate and working with them together, looking for different ideas on how to fund education, I have no problem supporting that whatsoever, and I would continue to do so.
Thank you, John. Dan, can you please describe your top 3 priorities for office?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think you can't consider priorities in these days without considering the situation that we find ourselves in. In the short term, I think we have to re-examine all of our priorities in light of our response to the pandemic. But in terms of the economy and the impact that this pandemic is likely to have on businesses, I think that the state needs to play a more expansive role in providing assistances to businesses as they weather this storm. I've never been a fan of the state helping one particular business or helping a business compete with another business. But when it comes to times like these, they're predicting a reduction in GDP of almost 30%. None of us have lived through anything near this severity. And when the risk and when the threat is to the entire business community, then it poses a threat to all of our community. And I think that when that happens, we all need to share the risk that our businesses are being exposed to. And that means that if we have to provide short interest or low interest loans, state-backed loans to get businesses through this pandemic, then that's what we need to do. And I'm supportive. I recognize the need that businesses are facing. I recognize the risk it creates to all of us in the community, and I think all of us in the community need to stand up and help.
Thank you, Dan. John, this is your question from the Record Eagle. Michigan is one of only 2 states that has exempted both the legislature and the governor from transparency laws, a fact that routinely ranks our state last place in state-by-state government accountability rankings. Do you believe exemptions for our state elected officials should end? If so, how would you work to change the status quo? If not, why not?
I do support that. I do support eliminating the exemptions for them. I've been on a board where I'm FOIA'd, I'm freedom information comes from me. I have no problem going to Lansing and having the same people looking at the same thing, trying to get information from me. The only thing I would caution or say is that I'm all for it whenever there's legislation being discussed or determined. There are some caucus meetings and things where people are just trying to set their priorities of what they want to go after. I don't know if that should be part of the Freedom of Information Act, but certainly any kind of deliberation by legislatures, the governor, I'm all for transparency. I operated that way under Parks and Rec, and I don't see any way to do it any different when I get to Lansing. So I definitely support that.
Thank you, John. Dan, would you support increased funding for early childhood education?
Yeah, the answer to that is absolutely. Early childhood education just works. When you invest appropriately in early childhood education, academic achievement goes up, graduation rates go up, students are far more likely to continue their education beyond high school. And, we've made some progress in that with Michigan's Great Start Readiness Program that now provides early childhood education to about half of the 4-year-olds in the state. I agree with the governor's proposal to make that universal for 4-year-olds, but we certainly can't stop there. I think that we need to make universal preschool available to 3-year-olds. And when we finish that, we need to follow the example of several states around the country and Governor Snyder's 21st Century Education Report and have fully funded early start preschool for children beginning at age 2. It just works. And these aren't daycare centers. These are schools with certified teachers. Investments in education are investments that we make in each other. And there's just no question, it's just absolutely clear that those investments pay off, pay dividends to us over time. And it's also absolutely clear that the earlier we start making those investments with early childhood education, the greater the return is. So I absolutely support increasing early childhood education.
Thank you, Dan. John, same question. Would you support increased funding for early childhood education?
Yes, I definitely supportive of it. The amount of money that we are spending on early education has gone up tremendously. It's over double since 2012. We started out about $100,000 or $100 million, in 2012. We're up at 250 million now today in this next budget. So it's been increased. It continues to increase. I definitely support those 4-year-olds being in training or in school, helping them out, getting prepared to go to school. Education's huge in our country, and we need to provide quality education for our kids.
Okay, thank you. Dan, this one comes from young professionals. Childcare is a barrier to individuals entering the workforce and to our employers, and for our employers to find qualified employees. How would you work to increase access to affordable and quality childcare in Northern Michigan?
There is unquestionably a childcare crisis in Michigan, and the cost is being paid by families, it's being paid by children, and it's being paid by businesses around the state. You'll hear folks say that the problem of providing affordable childcare comes from having too many regulations on childcare centers. And part of the problem with that analysis is that almost all of the funding we have in Michigan for childcare subsidies comes from the federal government. And those regulations on childcare centers come right along with that funding. Now, every other state in the union also has to comply with those regulations, and yet Michigan, who 10 years ago was near the top 10 in subsidies for childcare, is now near the bottom. By the standards issued by the United States Health and Human Services Administration, of the families in Michigan that need childcare, only 1 in 10 can afford it. Infant childcare cost almost as much on a yearly basis as it does for tuition at one of our state universities. An average minimum wage worker needs to work 30 weeks just to afford infant childcare. And it's frustrating that we don't seem to be addressing this issue in Lansing. In fact, a recent proposal by the governor to add almost $30 million to both subsidies for families and payments to child care centers couldn't make it through the Republican legislature. There are a number of things that we need to do. We need to increase the eligibility for low-income families for child care subsidies. It's currently at about 125% of the poverty level. We need to increase it to 200%. That would allow a family of 3 earning about $30,000 a year to receive a child care subsidy. We also need to increase the payment to child care providers. The federal government recommends that the subsidy be about 75% of the average cost of care in your community. We're currently at about a third of that, at 30%.
That's your time. Sorry. Thank you, Dan. John, this one comes from our audience. It sounds like a student. As a student very interested in political affairs, I'm wondering about the current state of our government here in Michigan. How do you feel about the governor and her handling of the pandemic? And what have you taken away from this year's situation that you would improve upon should the need arise in the future?
Absolutely. Great question. At first, when the pandemic started in early March, I was supportive of the actions of the governor. But as we got into April, into May, I was no longer that supportive of the restrictions. We needed to start opening up our business in a safe and a good way to get businesses back open. Our health of our economy is really important. We couldn't go that long. We needed to work quicker and better. We needed a list that we should be working on in this is a priority list, a preferred vendor list, one that we could have gone to right away and said, okay, who can provide us with the materials we need to open our businesses, to get PPEs to people that need it. And we didn't have anything. We waited way too long. We waited until a lot of our local companies were already selling PPE to federal entities before the state even got them here. It was poorly done that way, and I really think we missed a boat on that. I think I would have done it different by just getting out, working with our business community immediately. We had people right here in Traverse City making PPEs, and they were selling to the federal government. They should have been selling them to our Munson Medical Center, to our state government. It could have done it if we just reached out to them. Unfortunately, we did not do that, and it was a mistake. My wife is a nurse at Munson. She has dealt with that. They were short of PPEs for a long time. One mask for a week or a day or whatever they had to do. And we messed the boat. We should have been reaching out to our great business community in this state to do the right thing and get PPEs and get the equipment we needed right away. So I think that was a mistake.
Thank you, John. Dan, you're going to answer the same question. As a student very interested in political affairs, I'm wondering about the current state of our government here in Michigan. How do you feel about the governor and her handling of the pandemic? And what have you taken away from this year's situation that you would improve upon should the need arise in the future?
Yeah, I also think that's a great question. And I think there are a number of things that it's important to consider. One is that when you decide who you're going to vote for in this election, and when you select people to represent you in Lansing, you have no idea what the challenges are that those people are going to face. And so it's important to be really careful in making that selection, because there are times like this when we need terrific leadership. There was no playbook for this. And there wasn't a playbook for managing a pandemic. And I'm sure that there are things that if the governor had to do them again, she might do them differently. But there were an awful lot of serious issues that needed to be dealt with. We had an unemployment system in this state that had nowhere near the capacity to handle the load that it was going to face in Michigan. There were holes to fill almost everywhere in state government. And I don't fault her for not managing the supply chain here in northern Michigan. You know, in addition to that, I think if there's anything that we've learned and that we should take away from this, is that you can't prepare for a particular pandemic, right? We didn't see this one coming, but you can prepare for unanticipated events. And in Michigan, we haven't done a very good job of that. We're currently 44th in the country in spending on our public health system. Had we had a robust public health system, we would have been better prepared to manage this crisis. And it's not just this crisis we're failing to manage. In Michigan, because we haven't invested in public health, diabetes rates are higher, death from heart disease is higher, more women die in childbirth than other places of this country. We have higher infant mortality than other places in this country, all because we haven't made investments to prepare ourselves for these things. And we need to change that.
Thank you, Dan. John. It's no secret that Michigan's infrastructure has suffered years of neglect and underinvestment. COVID-19 has shed light on something we already knew in northern Michigan, and that's the limited access to broadband. How would you address increasing access to broadband in northern Michigan?
Absolutely, and I totally agree. Broadband is one of my issues that I think we need to expand on right away. I know there's some legislation that just may have gotten passed today through the House that would increase the possibility of getting broadband by investment that comes into the state, not going automatically to the suburban and urban areas, but to rural areas. So I'm hoping that passes the legislature so we can start looking at more funding in the northern Michigan area. I appreciate what AT&T has done over the last 3 years. They've spent $1.5 billion increasing connectivity in northern Michigan. And Great Lakes Energy is now providing some broadband north of us. And I know Traverse City Light and Power is working on it. With what's going on with COVID, it makes only sense that we have more availability to broadband for our kids trying to learn. Also, if we have major snow days and increased snow days in the winter, why not have that availability also so that we're not losing time? The other issue would be for the farmers in our area. I know that the farmers are truly in need of, would prefer to have broadband. And I'm all for looking at options of getting more of it here and working with the legislature to make sure that is possible with taking away some of the limitations that are in the rules right now.
Thank you, John. Dan, what are your plans for improving the cradle to grave educational pipeline in Michigan?
You know, I like to say, if you name any problem, education tends to be the solution. When you increase academic achievement and education, incomes go up, civic engagement goes up, domestic violence goes down, substance abuse goes down. So education is a public good that I think is always worthwhile investment, but the truth of the matter is we're not doing it very well in Michigan. We're 43rd in the country, as I mentioned, and falling. You know, Bill Gates likes to say that when he sees a problem, the first thing he does is look around to see who else is dealing with it and whether they're doing things better than he is. And so the good news about education is there are places in the country that are dealing with the same problem, and they are doing it better than we are. Tennessee, Minnesota, Washington State. And the good news is that there are great examples that we can follow. I think we need to do a couple of things. One is that we need to start earlier and go longer. And I'm not talking about the length of the day or the length of the school year. I'm talking about beginning at age 2 with fully funded preschool with certified teachers. And we need to extend public education beyond high school by 2 years. You know, college education isn't for everybody, but a good paying job ought to be. And I think that we ought to make investments in trade and vocational schools, which will help academic achievement. I also think that we need to change the funding model in Michigan. States around the country that are doing this well do it the exact opposite way that we do. We set a dollar figure that we're willing to spend per student, and then we list the requirements or the benchmarks that we want for that money: class size, test scores, academic achievement. Where they're doing it well, they do it just the opposite. they first list the things that they want, the goals.
Thank you, Dan.
Yep.
John, this question comes from the young professionals. Childcare is a barrier to individuals entering the workforce and for our employers to find qualified employees. How would you work to increase access to affordable and quality childcare in Northern Michigan?
First, we got to talk to our own communities and make them more accepting to daycares. There's no reason why we can't have more daycares in this area. But there are some burdens to opening a daycare. And the regulations that we talk about that need to be changed from Lara and Lansing, the former Department of Health and Human Services, aren't for child safety. We're talking about the peripheral regulations that sometimes are burdensome to daycare providers. It's you're always guilty when they come to your house. We need to change that regulation. If they come to your house, your daycare, and they find no guilt in anything, that shouldn't be a strike against you. Right now it is. I think we need to talk more with Lara and make it more acceptable to having daycares. I think there'll be plenty of daycares that would like to open, but a lot of our own neighborhoods chase our daycares out of there. As a community, we have to say that we are truly invested in doing daycares and providing for quality daycare for our kids, because it is going to keep our kids from coming here or leaving.
Thank you, John. Dan, it's no secret that Michigan's infrastructure has suffered years of neglect and underinvestment. COVID-19 has shed light on something we already knew in Northern Michigan, and that's the limited access to broadband. How would you address increasing access to broadband in Northern Michigan?
Yeah, you know, it's certainly true that the pandemic has caused us to focus on the need to expand high-speed internet and broadband throughout rural areas, particularly with students attending school from home or more and more people working from home. You know, I talked to a father in Kingsley a couple weeks ago who says the power pole's about 300 yards from his house, but the provider wants $9,000 to bring broadband to his house. He's driving his kids to the parking lot of the coffee shop so they can do their homework. I mean, we can do better than that. And while it's important for schools and folks working from home, broadband, the need for broadband goes well beyond that. It's essential for every business in rural Michigan to have high-speed internet access if they want to compete with other businesses in Michigan. John mentioned farmers, and I think that's absolutely true. Broadband, high-speed internet access allows them to streamline their processes. It allows them to use less water, reducing the cost of food, and it's better for the environment. I think there's a couple of things that we need to do. One, I think the governor, I agree with the legislation recently signed by the governor to require electric co-ops to allow access to their poles for broadband. I think we should expand that to all utilities in the state. And while the state's going to need to invest, I think we need federal block grant money in order to do this. And when we get it, we ought to allow local communities and local units of government access to those funds to form their own broadband if they choose to. And when we spend, we have to insist that we install the very latest current technology so that we're not going back 5 years from now to reinstall broadband again across rural Michigan.
Thank you, Dan. John, you get the last question. Can you please describe your top 3 priorities for office?
Absolutely, appreciate that. Education's number one. Preparing our kids for when they graduate with all the tools they need to go into skilled trades, go to college if they desire, or even into the military. Making sure that we give them a quality education here so they are prepared. That is very important. Equity comes part of that, making sure schools are fairly funded throughout the state. My daughters were both Traverse City West graduates. I think they got a wonderful education. TCAPS did a wonderful job, appreciative of that. But that's number one. A healthy and vibrant community economy here. Making sure that we have a good balance of tourism and commerce. Making sure our small businesses are taken care of. make sure they get the help they need. We got to make sure that continues. I want my kids, again, to be able to come back here and get a job if they so desire. And we're going to work on that. Broadband is another one that I have on my list. I won't talk too much about that. We already did on the broadband. I just think that there's a lot of private investment happening right now in the state of Michigan. And if we need to invest a little bit of public funds to help that out, great. I want to maintain that, continue it, and advance it into our area.
All right. Thank you, John. That wraps our questions. And now we'll move on to closing statements. The order of speakers is reversed for closing statements. So John, you get to go first and have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Nate. I appreciate your moderating this event, and Traverse Connect for having us on. Appreciate it very much. Just want to tell the folks, I am dedicated to this community. I've lived in other communities, and this one is a exceptional community. And I can't say enough about our area, and I would be thrilled to represent us in Lansing. I will continue on with all my priorities that I mentioned. I just think that if we work together and continue to work together, and I am one that will listen to both sides of the aisle, work across the aisle to make sure things get done in Lansing. I'm not one to sit and just take up space in a seat there. I'm actually going there to get things done and work with other legislators like Senator Schmidt, Senator Vanderwall, Jack O'Malley. I think we'd make a great Northern Michigan team, and I look forward to that opportunity.
Thank you, John. Dan, you have 3 minutes for your closing.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. And I too would like to thank Traverse Connect and the Record Eagle for giving us the opportunity this evening. You know, I hear all the time about how divided we are. And I guess if you're honest, there's some truth to that. But, you know, for me, I grew up here, I raised my family here. And it just seems to me that most of the folks I know, whether they consider themselves Republicans or Democrats, all want the same things. I mean, we want great schools and we want our kids to get a terrific education. And we find ourselves in a state that's 43rd in the country in academic achievement and falling. We want clean water and we want a clean bay to swim in. And yet we dump 6 billion gallons of raw sewage into the Great Lakes every year from this state because we haven't invested in our infrastructure and maintained our water treatment facilities. We want an open and honest government in Lansing. And yet we find ourselves ranked dead last in terms of the transparency of our government. You know, I don't think anybody has cornered the market on good ideas, but we're not going to be able to solve these problems unless we begin to sit down together and talk together. We don't know where the good ideas will come from unless we start those conversations, and I'm absolutely committed to doing that. And, you know, we spent a lot of time this evening talking about the things that we'll do. And I'm not naive enough to think that any one state representative can accomplish that, probably not one senator or even one president. But I'll promise the people of the communities this, that if you send me to Lansing, I'll fight every day to make sure our kids get a great education. I'll make sure that I'll do everything I can to make sure that our businesses weather this storm and come out stronger than they were before. And that we make sure that when we come through this, we don't leave anybody behind. And I'll tell you what I won't do. I won't vote for any regulation unless I can explain to you how it makes us safer, healthier, or more prosperous. I won't put the interests of my party in front of the interests of this community. I will never choose the things that are politically easy over the things that are right. And I'll never back down from a fight. You know, I happen to think that we're entitled to a government that we can be proud of. And if that seems naive to you, I hope that you'll at least agree with me that we're entitled to a government that doesn't embarrass us. And I'll fight for that every day in Lansing. And I want to thank you for the opportunity again for this evening to venture north. And Nate, thanks so much.
Thank you, Dan. And thank you both for your time and your thoughtful responses. These were great questions, and you both put a lot of effort into answering them. You know, in running for office and serving in a public elected position is no small investment, and we understand that and we appreciate it. Also, putting on a candidate forum like this is no small undertaking. So I'd like everybody to make sure they recognize Kirstie, Warren, Rachel, and Liz, and Molly for their time. They put an enormous amount of time and effort into making this come together. So thank you all. I'll pass it over to Kirstie.
Well, thank you, Nate, and thank you so much for serving as our moderator. And a big thank you to our candidates for taking the time to connect with our investors and with the public. We certainly appreciate understanding where you align on issues that are important to the business community. We really appreciate you letting us learn a little bit more about your plans for the future. So we also appreciate the great audience questions, and we wish we could have gotten to more of them, but we do look forward to sharing more information about the upcoming November 3rd election. We'll be posting our online candidate profiles for State Representative, Grand Traverse County Commission, TCAPS Board, and NMC Board soon. We also hope that you will join us for our second Meet the Candidates event for the Grand Traverse County Commission on Tuesday, September 29th at 6 p.m. Again, these questions are generated by our investors, and there will also be an opportunity for the audience to participate as well. So we look forward to continuing to offer access to our future decision makers and advocating on behalf of our Northern Michigan business community, and we appreciate you joining us tonight. Good night.